Thank you very much, Xavier, for sharing Lufthansa's success story on augmented analytics. Let me quickly shift gears and move into predictions on data demand. I'll introduce IATA Head of Business Intelligence, Adnan Itani, to talk us through this section.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure and honor to be here with you. The fact that we are here face to face, I mean, it just speaks on its own. I would like to just echo on one of the colleagues. He mentioned a couple of presentations ago about the CEO of Zoom. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, there is no fancy virtual meeting, whatever software provider can, replace the human interaction. And I'm a firm believer that there is no AI technology that can, replace the human empathy. In all cases, just on a personal note, I flew from Montreal, and I am so happy to be jet lagged. This is a feeling that I truly miss during the past period. So yeah, without further ado, I'm here today to give you a little bit on a bird's eye view on the landscape of business intelligence, how it changed during COVID. So I'll try to move this. So the pre-pandemic, life was rosy in its own way in terms of BI. Airlines historically, or typically, aviation in general is an industry that is leaving no stone unturned in terms of data. So they want to get as much data as possible. However, during the pandemic, there has been a lot of changes. I would firmly say that the value of data has increased, but it's the data sources that has shifted, and there has been an imbalance in the legacy data sources. So it is an evolving. We are not through the, as they say, through the storm. I mean, it was mentioned earlier, we are at the storm yet, not necessarily at the center of that storm. It's an evolving situation. And this imbalance, people used to buy their ticket and fly. They used to book. However, during the pandemic, airlines wanted to have more visibility on what's happening, what are the recovery factors happening anywhere, what are the signals, what happened with the exchanges, refunds, and so on. So people tend to do those exchanges, but the booking has gone down drastically. But people were planning after the pandemic, so people start to search where to go, right? And this shift between booking into search has been vocal in the past period. And the business mantra is no one knows, no one has the crystal ball, right? But I hope that we are on the right direction. I mean, again, the fact that we are all here is one of the signals that things are going into the right direction. But airlines need to be, agile when it comes to looking at data and taking decisions. And I couldn't think of a better example than asking someone from the trenches to help us in understanding the journey of data from one of the airlines. So for that, I ask Jon from Copa. Jon is the Director of Sales and Planning and Distribution for Copa Airlines based in Panama. He has spent the past 11 years working in different areas such as maintenance, finance, distribution, planning, agency sales programs, market intelligence, and sales planning, with a major focus on data analytics to understand customer and market behavior that drive commercial decision-making. Just one last comment before you start. I'm so glad that we don't have to mute or unmute ourselves when we talk. So the floor is yours.
All right. Can I have this? Thank you. Thank you, Adnan, for the introduction. And as he said, today I'm going to be talking with you about what we did at Copa to understand better customer demand, and given all the lack of signals that were out there because of what we traditionally use to understand what's going on with our customers. All right. First, I wanted to share with you who we are at Copa, because it's very, very important for the context of the conversation. So we're basically a Latin American carrier, a hub carrier located in Panama, right in the middle of the Americas, and our main business is connecting markets north and south and also the Caribbean. And not only big markets, we're also connecting medium and small markets that without a hub or without a hub carrier, we're unable to have or to sustain a point-to-point operation. That And then on top of that, it's our right infrastructure that we call there, which is basically a sea-level runway, a right airport there in Panama that brings some efficiencies to us. And then our customer focus and focused on bringing value, a reliable product that it's consistent and always on time. And we're very proud to be one of the leading worldwide carriers on-time performance. So with all that strategy, everything was going well. When we looked at the data for customer demand or passengers traveled internationally in the Americas from 2016 and on, it had been growing consistently at a 5% growth on a year-over-year basis. And looking from the data perspective, basically we were focused on the customer journey, trying to understand our customers all around on a 360-degree view from the different data sources that were available. It's, social media, the searches, booking and ticketing, ancillaries, airports, irregular operations, etc. And we were in the process of creating this. But from a customer demand perspective, traditionally, airlines have always focused on booking and ticketing data. That has been like the main focus always to understand what's going on with demand throughout many, many, many years. But then what happens on 2020? We got the COVID crisis, right? And all across the globe, airlines were facing restrictions for travel, governments were putting in place lockdowns, and people weren't basically allowed to travel. And for us, basically, we faced the same thing. And this is a picture of the Tocumen airport with all of our 100 airplanes grounded on March 22nd. That's a date that we have engraved in our minds. And at the moment, it was for what we thought was going to be a month long, and actually lasted 6 months of grounding. So in terms of demand, basically, it was gone. So demand levels were at 10% of what they were on 2019, basically because of travel restrictions, and people were scared. People didn't want to get out of their homes because they didn't know what was going to happen, or they didn't have more information on the COVID crisis, right? Or how long it was going to take, and priorities basically changed for the customer. So what happens when there's basically no booking and ticketing data to analyze and to understand customer demand, right? When you look at the customer journey, basically there's no journey. So here at Copa, or us at Copa, what we decided to do was, let's take a look at what needs to happen for the customer to enter into the customer journey. And the 3 questions that we asked ourselves were, are they in a quarantine? So can they get out of their homes? Can they travel? And are they spending? And to answer for these questions, we looked for what data was out there available for free, and also talked with a few partners of us to see what they can share so that we can analyze those data and blend it with all of our internal sources in the customer journey, and from there have a more holistic view of what was going to happen with demand in the upcoming months. And just to give quick examples on what we were looking for. So, for example, in terms of COVID cases, we were looking on a country-by-country basis, what was the trend of COVID cases? If they were going on the rise or if they were going down, to see if that helped us to understand what was going to happen with restrictions for travel. And in the same way, we were also looking at mobility data to see if people were actually getting out of their homes, or they were able to go to school, back to work, or eventually using public transportation in the different countries that we operate. And finally, more specifically, the travel restrictions themselves on a country-by-country basis. And this is very important because, as I said at the beginning, we're basically an international carrier. Our domestic operation is like 1%, so it's really, really small. Therefore, what happens with the restrictions in the different markets, it's key for our performance. And as you can see here, we had different markets with different restrictions. We had markets that were wide open, so everybody can come. We had markets that had some restrictions to some travelers or some region flows. We had markets that were closed and allowing only nationals traveling, and then some others that were basically 100% shut down for quite a while. Then the other source of data that we looked at was the spend data, because we knew that customers had different priorities, and customers probably weren't thinking about spending on travel. Rather, they probably lost their jobs or they were reprioritizing the way they were spending money. So we wanted to look into that and see if that helped us predict demand as well. And finally, as kind of like an entrance into the more traditional customer journey, we also try to see how those previous new data points also help us predict search data or use search data also as a predictor of customer demand. And this was basically the more traditional .com, but also from meta searches as well. And with all of that, and this is just an example table to show you what we were looking at an aggregator level, we tried to see it as a funnel, as the customer journey, and see if all of these different data sets on a country-by-country basis, on a sale month or a flown month, would help us to predict what was going to happen with demand. And what we learned was that for some countries, it seemed to work. That seemed that the mobility or the credit card spend were helping us to predict what was going to happen with search or with industry demand in a given market. But at the same time, some other markets were just noise all around. But what was important for us and what we learned from this exercise, it was actually that the beginning of the funnel was the one that was driving everything that happened down the road. So government restrictions for travel for an international carrier were the main reason or the main thing to allow us or block what was going to happen with demand. And of course, this can vary if you're a domestic carrier, that those other predictors could help you probably to predict what was going to happen with demand. But in the case of us, an international carrier, that was the main constraint. And as we saw throughout the day, I've seen this chart quite a lot today. But this is a very, very good example. When the US lifted the restrictions for Europeans traveling to the US, we saw the surge in demand that happened at the end of September this year. And it's because there's a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of people willing to travel, but these restrictions are not allowing for that. And finally, in a nutshell, what we're focusing on right now is on a day-to-day basis, almost, looking at how these government restrictions change and integrating those into the decision-making, the commercial decision-making in the company, to see how we need to predict or adjust because of the demand performance that we're going to be seeing in the upcoming weeks or future months. So at the end, we remain positive that given the vaccination rollout and also the lifting of some of these government restrictions, plus all the lessons learned during the pandemic, are going to help us come out even stronger from this, and not only us, it's all of us in this room as an industry, because it's been the worst crisis in our history, but we're here and we survived, so I think that deserves a round of applause for all of us in the room. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Jon. I mean, if it is an example of resilience, you have seen Google mobility, you have seen credit cards combined with the classical data sources. It is just mind-blowing if you think of it this way. So with that, we will switch the gears from the airline perspective, and we will zoom from a different angle. For that, I would like to ask Mr. Trevor Kaufman. He's the CEO of Piano, a global analytics and activation platform. Piano helps organizations understand and influence customer behavior by putting the power of insight and logic into their hands. The company global customer base includes IBM, CNBC, among many others. The Piano team that Trevor has brought together have won countless awards for their groundbreaking media and technology work, including Webby's, Leon's, among many others. With that, Trevor, the floor is yours.
Hi, so he's right. I really don't know much about the travel industry, but I do know a lot about the media business. And if I can speak freely, I think a lot of what I've heard today in terms of customer centricity and digital transformation and all of that has to a large extent already happened in the media business, and hopefully I can share what I've learned there. The media business actually prospered during COVID, but the media business suffered from a viral epidemic that was pretty similar that happened a couple of years before called Facebook. And there was a tremendous dip in revenue, tremendous crisis, and the media business has now prospered, digital publishing has prospered, because what they did was they first balanced their relationship with aggregators like Facebook and Google, focusing on differentiating the experience in their owned and operated sites and apps. But perhaps more importantly, they democratized data and logic. And that's, I think, a thing that I haven't seen a lot of here that I'm concerned about. Most people understand in a business that they have a lot of data they're not leveraging. But a lot of businesses have a problem that I've seen manifest again and again today, which is they sort of move at the speed of projects. We've heard so many smart things about really interesting, quite complicated, multidisciplinary projects that different travel companies have launched to evolve their operations. But projects are not 4 or 5 days long, right? They're 4 or 5 months long or a year long. And that speed is a real problem for a lot of these businesses. So what we focus on is making data available, right? Breaking down silos between different systems, making that data available in real time, and then leveraging that for reporting and targeting in a compliance environment. So what that looks like is opening up the audience who can consume data in the organization to a much larger group. I think, I keep hearing we get together with the IT teams, with the BI teams, and that's great. That's really valuable. But as long as those guys are the gatekeepers behind doing anything in the business, it's a real problem. So we really focus on how do we expand the number of people in the organization who can conduct analysis. And then similarly, how do you get the business to respond in real time to data? You need more people to be able to write logic than the IT team. You need the marketing team or the product team or whatever teams you have internally to be able to do that, because without that, it's too slow. Sometimes people will say, well, how do I bring a machine learning model to bear in my business? And I say, let's try doing it right here in the room, right? Being able to do these things in a couple of hours or a day is transformative, being able to do them over weeks, and that's made a massive difference in the media business. So our media clients are what you would expect, and you might not have heard of Piano, but I assure you I've heard of all of you, and I'm willing to bet that I have a first-party cookie on every single device in this room, and that's because you guys all read articles, as we all do, right? So these companies operate at massive scale, and they have millions of customers. I entitled this presentation, "The Customer is Data," right? If we want to be customer-centric, we don't have a personal relationship with all of these customers. All we have about them is their data. And that data is such a precious asset, but too often it's not properly collected or made available. And while I can't show the revenue curve of our individual clients, and I can point to ours because we do that to brag, what's more important is the results that we drive for customers, which of course drive our results. The process of testing more always results in better business outcomes. That's not because piano or any other tool or consultancy is magical. It's because marketing works, and the more you try, the faster, the better the business is going to do. So we're now returning about $2.2 billion annually of incremental revenue to our customers. So you may not realize this, but on almost all of the media sites that you go to, when content is recommended to you, when you're shown a bundle, when there are prices, those are all the result of propensity scores and algorithms that are recommending the right content to you, the right product to you, and the right price to you. Media needed to do that in order to survive. My argument is probably the travel industry does too. I'm a frustrated travel consumer, right? I wish I knew more about the inside of the travel business, but I certainly know that when my carrier, who I have a lot of loyalty to, shows me the same request to buy travel insurance the same way for the 100th time, and I say no for the 100th time, and they've provided me with no content or relevance or A/B testing around why I should take that offer, there's probably a data and logic problem within that business. When I move from the carrier's hub market to Philadelphia and they don't seem to notice or tell me where they fly from my home city or make any difference whatsoever after 12 years of being at the top tier of their loyalty program, I think there's a data and logic business at the heart of travel, and it's that no matter how many cool projects we initiate, unless that data and logic process gets democratized in the organization, we're never going to be able to have the flexibility to learn as quickly from the customer and make a relevant offer to them as we will if we change that practice. So we think a lot about what is fashionable to put in kind of a maturity curve, but really this is a bit less linear than that. But really what we need to do in these owned and operated channels is make sure that the data are available to the people who need to use them and that they have ways of acting on those things in real time and even can share those analytic data sources with partners with the appropriate governance, because that's what enables an industry to really be customer-centric and better serve the customer. So I sped through that because I wanted to get it done within 10 minutes, and I think I did. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really enjoying learning from you all, and hope to talk to you later. Thank you.